I'm Barry McNeely. I'm the Legacy Youth Leadership Coordinator here at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. The Legacy students have been brought in from all over Jefferson County here in Birmingham, and they are a number of students from a number of different schools and different backgrounds, and they're interested in learning about civil and human rights and the discourse on civil and human rights issues. One of the things they study is the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they want to see how that applies to the world that they live in with current issues and events, and how have the lessons of the civil rights movement and the fledgling human rights movement, how have those lessons been translated into world action? How do they fit in with the lessons that have been learned into doing something on a local level that might spur world action?
And what has been their reaction to that?
Well, one of the things is that they've learned that human beings can sometimes not be so nice to one another. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that as young people, the travesties that we deal with on a daily basis are not always the things that they focus on. However, once they can focus on those things, they feel a great deal of responsibility to be able to do something about it. That responsibility, however, is important that we add an avenue to let them feel as if their voices can be heard. And really today's discussion was one of those broad avenues where they were able to kind of jump on and express their views and their ideas, and we really liked getting the chance to see them do that today.
One of the themes that kept coming up actually in the forum was the need for public input. One of the students mentioned particularly the disconnect, I think, between the diplomats who negotiate things in the United States, in the United Nations, and what each different public in those countries actually might feel about those different political decisions. And I thought it's interesting that in so many ways, public input and public participation is part of the challenge in seeking access to rights, for example.
Well, the idea of those rights and those liberties, one of the things that they look at, especially from their age group, is they look at the idea that sometimes young people need to be seen but not heard. And they really don't feel as if they have that voice in those issues. And so when they're in a classroom or they're watching TV and somebody's discussing policy in Afghanistan or policy in Iran or policy in Iraq, as they see those things being discussed, they realize, hey, nobody's discussed that with us, before. Nobody has asked us about it.
I think one of the interesting themes that occurred to me before I came to Birmingham was that the current policies, and again, this project is about thinking 5, 10, 20 years out, but that a number of the things that we've asked people what America's goals should be in the world are not those that are being worked on right now. And I wonder, one of the things that relates back to this public input question is, are we even talking about the same goals? Are our leaders and our general public talking about the same goals? I mean, one of the things that is so important that's come out is education, and that you heard a lot about that in this forum today, both as a means for stability in other countries, but also these students said, feeling in a way ill-equipped for a globalized economy in a way. And obviously, I think that's an issue. I wonder what your thoughts were on that in terms of are the ideas that these youth are discussing those that are being pursued by our leaders? Is there a real disconnect?
Well, I think that it's a forced disconnect. One of the things that also came up today was the idea of being pragmatic. Those things that really need to be addressed, those things that really need to have our immediate focus right now are just so large. We are currently, fighting 2 wars and 2 different battlefronts. We're fighting really a 3rd war if you think about the economy. That's almost at the stage of war. When you're spending more money in terms of government bailouts and stimulus packages than we've ever spent before as a nation. when we do those things, it's almost like going to war.
Yeah.
So it's like you take all of the oxygen out of the room. And so the things that are important in terms of, for example, I didn't hear, the epidemic problems that we're dealing with, bird flu and swine flu, HIV, those things didn't come up because right now, in even education on the end of that, those things are very important. And I think those things like in global warming, those things are important, but the disconnect is, like I said, it's a forced disconnect because it's like we have to get these immediate issues in order. And I think one of the things with our country is, I think that people are starting to get impatient with the idea that you got this 800-pound gorilla in the room, but there are a lot of other things going on too. And there's only so much that can be attacked at one time. But I think keeping the idea of dialogue going, it focuses our attention back on the other things.
Keeps the issue on.
Yeah, the war in Iraq won't last forever, and the war in Afghanistan won't last forever. I cross my fingers and say that the economy will get better. So these things eventually will move off the table, but then we'll still have a lot of other underlying problems. So keeping that dialogue going is an important way of keeping our attention focused on other issues that are not going to go anywhere.
Right.
HIV is not going anywhere. In the educational system, the current status that it's in, it's not going to go anywhere. But I guess it just takes a back seat for now.
Last question. You work with youth. What do you see as their capacity to deal with this increasingly small, interdependent world where swine flus cross borders, where jobs are, some of the attendees today said, they feel like they're being trained for jobs that they're not, that aren't there when they're actually finished their education and training. How do you see the capacity of youth to adapt to this new world?
Well, I think the key in what you just said is the word adapt. Human beings are amazingly adaptable. And the young people that we're dealing with, they see that the future is not in Detroit with the auto industry. The idea of green jobs, things dealing with the environment, that's something that they're looking towards. Competing in a global economy, they are looking at language. They're having to learn more languages. They will morph and they will adapt to that. But what we have to do as concerned citizens and educators, and we're all educators, as educators, we have to make those things very real to them. We have to make it real that our applications of the sciences and mathematics and things of that nature are going to be preeminent now. Our understanding of global discourse and global traditions. The administration just, went to Cairo and began, a discourse with Islamic communities and Islamic countries. They have to be focused on those things. Because I think I want to say, in closing to that idea, is one of the key advantages that they have is our young people are not constrained by the civil rights movement. Our young people are not constrained by the Cold War. They are a generation that really is born after both of those major things. And so now, without that baggage to hold them back, I think they'll have the view and the perspective to be able to take us into the 21st century and beyond. We just have to make sure that we put the pieces in place for them to be able to do that.
Better equipped than we are.
Much better.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.